The whisper of the Wyoming wind carried the news across town faster than telegraph lines ever could. Madeline Beckett, once the belle of Riverstone, had been cast aside by her fiancé for a younger woman. At 32, with fine lines beginning to frame her eyes and mouth, Madeline found herself alone in a society that valued youth above all else. The summer of 1878 had never felt so cruel. Madeline stood in front of her small vanity mirror, fingers lightly tracing the delicate creases at the corners of her eyes. These weren't deep furrows, just the gentle markings of a life lived with laughter and worry in equal measure. But they had been enough for Harold Jenkins, her fiancé of 2 years, to declare her past her prime and take up with a 19-year-old from the next town over. "You deserve someone who'll appreciate what's still blooming, not what's beginning to wither," Harold had said when he returned her grandmother's ring, as if his words were some kind of kindness rather than a knife. Madeline dropped her hand from her face and straightened her spine. She wouldn't give Riverstone the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Not when she had the deed to her late father's ranch sitting in the drawer beside her bed, the last gift from a man who believed his daughter could handle anything the wild frontier threw at her. The following morning, Madeline packed her belongings: dresses, books, her father's old rifle, and whatever else would fit in 2 trunks, and boarded the stagecoach heading west toward her inheritance. The Rocking Bee Ranch lay 30 miles outside of Promise Creek, a town even smaller than Riverstone but far enough away that her humiliation wouldn't follow. The journey was dusty and jarring, but Madeline kept her chin high as the coach rumbled into Promise Creek 3 days later. The small town was little more than a main street with a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and a handful of other buildings necessary for frontier life. Madeline stepped down from the coach, her legs stiff and her resolve hardening with each breath of the mountain air. "Miss Beckett." A weathered man in his 60s approached her, hat in hand. "I'm Ezra Thompson. Your father's lawyer sent word you'd be coming to claim the property." "Yes, thank you for meeting me, Mr. Thompson. Begging your pardon, madam, but you should know the ranch ain't what it once was. Your father was ill those last 2 years and the place has suffered for it." Madeline swallowed hard. "I understand, I'll make do." Ezra scratched his beard. "There's been a caretaker of sorts, a cowhand who worked for your father. Name's Isaiah Ingram. Stayed on without pay after your father passed, just to keep the worst of the rustlers away. Strange sort, keeps to himself mostly, but honest as the day is long." The ride to the ranch was silent except for the creak of the wagon wheels and Ezra's occasional comment about the land. When they crested the final hill, Madeline's heart sank. The Rocking Bee was indeed a shadow of what she remembered from her childhood visits. The corral fences sagged, the barn roof had patches missing, and the main house looked tired, its paint peeling in the relentless sun. As Ezra pulled the wagon to a stop, a tall figure emerged from the barn. He moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own skin, though his clothes were worn and dusty. His hat, pulled low over his eyes, couldn't hide the strong line of his jaw, nor the curious tilt of his head as he approached. "Miss Beckett, this here's Isaiah Ingram," Ezra said. "Isaiah, this is Howard Beckett's daughter, come to claim her inheritance." Isaiah tipped his hat back to reveal eyes the color of a summer storm. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines that spoke of years squinting against the sun and wind. He wasn't young, perhaps 40, but there was something vital and present about him that made age seem irrelevant. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and slightly rough, "your father was a good man. Thank you for staying on, Mr. Ingram. I understand you've been protecting the property." A slight smile curved his lips. "Just doing what needed doing." Ezra cleared his throat. "Well, I'll be heading back to town. You need anything, Miss Beckett, you just send word." After helping with her trunks, Ezra left, the wagon kicking up dust as it disappeared down the road. Madeline turned to find Isaiah watching her, his expression unreadable. "You planning to stay then?" he asked. "This is my home now, Mr. Ingram," he nodded slowly. "It'll need work. I'm not afraid of work." No, I expect you aren't. His eyes took in her travel-worn but clearly quality dress, the determined set of her shoulders. But ranching ain't like anything you've done before, I'd wager. Perhaps not, but I'm a quick study. Isaiah looked past her to the fields beyond, where a handful of cattle grazed. Your father had plans before he took sick, said this place could be something again. Then we'll make it something, Madeline said, surprising herself with the we. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Let's get you settled then. Tomorrow comes early out here. True to his word, Isaiah knocked on her door before dawn. Madeline was already awake, dressed in the simplest skirt and blouse she owned. Her hair was pulled back in a practical knot, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Isaiah looked momentarily startled. Thought you might need more time to adjust. I've adjusted, Madeline said, stepping out onto the porch. Show me what needs doing first. Over the next weeks, Madeline learned more than she thought possible about ranch life. Her hands grew calloused, her skin bronzed despite the wide-brimmed hat she wore. Isaiah proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to mend fences, tend to the few animals they had, and prioritize the endless tasks that faced them. They worked side by side from dawn until dusk, speaking little beyond what was necessary. Isaiah was not a man of many words, but when he did speak, his observations were thoughtful and often touched with dry humor that caught Madeline by surprise. A month into her new life, Madeline rode into town for supplies. She'd barely tied her horse at the general store when she heard the whispers. That's her, the spinster from back east. Heard she got jilted by some banker or lawyer. Well, at her age, what did she expect? Madeline felt the heat of embarrassment creep up her neck. So much for leaving her humiliation behind. Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, greeted her warmly enough but couldn't resist adding, "Such a shame, a lady like you out at that run-down place with only that Ingram fellow for company. Not proper at all." "Mr. Ingram has been nothing but respectful and helpful," Madeline replied, her voice tight. Mrs. Peterson clicked her tongue. "Still, a woman your age should be settling down, not playing at ranching." "I'm not playing at anything, Mrs. Peterson, and my age is my own concern." The ride back to the ranch was long and lonely. By the time Madeline arrived, the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple that would have taken her breath away if she hadn't been so lost in thought. Isaiah emerged from the barn as she dismounted. One look at her face and he frowned. "Town folk getting to you?" Madeline busied herself with unpacking the supplies. "People will talk, it doesn't matter." "Doesn't seem like it doesn't matter." She paused, a sack of flour in her arms. "Do you think I'm too old to be starting over like this?" Isaiah's eyebrows rose. "Too old? You can't be more than 32, she supplied. He actually laughed at that, a short, surprised sound. "Hell, Miss Beckett, I'm 43. If you're too old, what does that make me?" "It's different for men," she said, resuming her task. "Is it?" He took the flour from her, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Seems to me age is just a number folks use when they can't find anything real to judge you by." That night, Madeline stood before her mirror again, studying the lines that had cost her what she once thought was her future. In the soft lamplight, they seemed less like flaws and more like marks of passage. The next morning, a fierce thunderstorm rolled in from the mountains. The rain beat against the windows as Madeline and Isaiah hurried to secure what they could. They were nearly back to the house when lightning struck a tree near the corral, splitting it with a deafening crack. The horses panicked, and before either could react, the corral gate broke open under the pressure of frightened animals. "The horses!" Madeline shouted over the storm. Without hesitation, they both ran toward the fleeing animals. The rain came down in blinding sheets, turning the ground to slick mud. Madeline managed to grab the lead rope of one horse, but another bolted past her toward the creek, which was already rising dangerously with the rainfall. Isaiah sprinted after it, his long legs carrying him swiftly despite the treacherous footing. Madeline secured the horse she'd caught and followed. By the time she reached the creek bank, Isaiah had managed to catch the frightened mare, but the ground beneath him was giving way as the creek rose. "Isaiah," she called out, fear clutching at her heart. He looked up, his face a mask of concentration as he tried to calm the horse while keeping his own footing. The bank crumbled further, and before Madeline could reach them, both Isaiah and the horse tumbled into the rushing water. The horse managed to scramble to the other side, but Isaiah was swept downstream, fighting against the current. Without thinking, Madeline ran along the bank, keeping pace with him until she spotted a fallen tree extending partially into the creek. She positioned herself on it and reached out as Isaiah approached, their hands connected, his grip iron strong despite the cold water. With all her strength, Madeline pulled, helping him fight his way to the bank. Together, they collapsed on the muddy ground, gasping for breath as the rain continued to pour down on them. "You're crazy," Isaiah panted, water streaming from his clothes. Madeline pushed wet hair from her face. "You would have done the same for me." He looked at her then, really looked at her, his eyes moving over her mud-streaked face with something like wonder. "Yes," he said finally. "Yes, I would have." They made their way back to the house, both soaked to the bone and shivering. In the kitchen, Madeline stoked the fire while Isaiah changed into dry clothes. When he returned, she had coffee brewing and was wrapping herself in a blanket, her own clothes changed but her hair still damp around her shoulders. "Thank you," he said simply, accepting the cup she offered. Madeline nodded, her hands wrapped around her own cup for warmth. The horses, all accounted for, that mare found her way back to the others. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the storm rage outside and the occasional pop of the fire. Something had shifted between them, though Madeline couldn't quite name it. "Why did you stay?" she asked suddenly. "After my father died, you had no obligation." Isaiah stared into his coffee for a long moment. "Your father gave me a chance when others wouldn't. Said a man's worth isn't in where he's been, but in where he's going." He looked up at her. "Seemed only right to honor that by looking after his place until you decided what to do with it. And what did you think I would do with it?" A small smile played at his lips. "Sell it, most likely." "It's what most city women would do." "I'm not most women." "No," he agreed, his eyes meeting hers with quiet intensity. "You certainly are not." The storm lasted through the night and into the next day, keeping them confined to the house. They spent the time taking inventory of repairs still needed, planning for the future of the ranch as if it were the most natural thing in the world for them to be doing this together. By the time the clouds broke and sunlight spilled over the land again, Madeline had come to a realization that both thrilled and terrified her. She was developing feelings for Isaiah Ingram. Summer gave way to autumn, bringing with it golden aspen leaves and crisp mornings. The ranch was slowly coming back to life under their care. They'd repaired most of the fences, patched the barn roof, and even added a few more cattle to their small herd. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Isaiah cleared his throat. "There's a harvest dance in town next Saturday. Thought you might like to go." Madeline felt a flutter in her chest. "Are you asking me to accompany you, Mr. Ingram?" "I believe I am, Miss Beckett," she smiled. "Then I accept." The night of the dance, Madeline wore her best dress, a deep blue that complemented her eyes. She'd let her hair down, the chestnut waves falling past her shoulders. When she emerged from her room, Isaiah was waiting in the parlor. He'd clearly made an effort as well, wearing a clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed. The look on his face when he saw her made every moment of preparation worthwhile. "You are a vision, Madeline," he said softly, using her first name for the first time. The dance was held in the town hall, decorated with autumn leaves and candles. Heads turned when they entered, whispers following in their wake, but Madeline found she didn't care. With Isaiah's hand at the small of her back, she felt protected from whatever judgments might be cast. They danced, Isaiah moving with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback. During a lively reel, Madeline caught sight of Mrs. Peterson watching them, lips pursed in disapproval. "Don't mind her," Isaiah murmured, following her gaze. Some folks can't stand to see others happy. As the evening wore on, the whispers seemed to increase. During a break for refreshments, Madeline overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Can you believe it, her with him, after she got thrown over for being too old and worn? Well, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. And he's not exactly prime picking himself with those years in prison. Madeline nearly dropped her punch cup. Prison? Surely they weren't talking about Isaiah, but when she turned to find him, the look on his face told her he'd heard too. "Let's get some air," he said, his voice tight. Outside, under a sky scattered with stars, Isaiah paced while Madeline waited for him to speak. "I should have told you," he finally said. "Your father knew. It's why I came out west in the first place, to start fresh where nobody knew me." "Told me what, Isaiah?" He stopped pacing and faced her, his expression resolute. "I spent 5 years in a Pennsylvania prison for a robbery I didn't commit. By the time they found the real culprit, I'd served my sentence. Your father was the only man willing to hire me afterward." Madeline absorbed this, searching his face in the moonlight. "Is that all?" Isaiah blinked, clearly expecting a different reaction. "Isn't that enough?" "You're not that man anymore," she said simply. "And I'm not the woman I was when I arrived here. People change, Isaiah, they grow." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Most wouldn't see it that way. I'm not most people." His hand came up to trace the line of her cheek, his touch feather light. "No, you most certainly are not." The ride home was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken understanding. When they reached the ranch, Isaiah helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. "Thank you for the dance, Madeline. Thank you for asking me." They stood there for a moment, the night air cool around them, before Isaiah leaned down and brushed his lips against hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow before November's end. The work didn't stop. Animals still needed feeding. Water troughs needed breaking when they froze over, but there was a peaceful quality to the white-covered land that Madeline came to cherish. Inside the house, things had changed too. Isaiah had moved from the small cabin he'd occupied to the main house, ostensibly to save on firewood, though they both knew it was more than that. They weren't sharing a room. Propriety still had some hold, even in the wilderness, but the evenings spent reading by the fire, the meals shared at the same table, the casual touches that grew more frequent and lingering, all spoke of a deepening connection. One evening, as a blizzard howled outside, Madeline sat mending a shirt while Isaiah whittled by the fire. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, and she found herself smiling. "What's that smile for?" Isaiah asked, looking up from his work. "I was just thinking how different my life is from what I expected a year ago." He set aside his knife and wood. "Do you regret it, coming here?" "Not for a moment," she said honestly. "This feels right in a way nothing else ever has." Isaiah moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "Madeline, I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures, but I want you to know that whatever happens with this ranch, with the town, with anything else, I'm here with you for as long as you'll have me." She squeezed his hands, feeling the calluses that matched her own. "And if I want that to be forever," his smile was slow and warm, "then forever it is." They were married on Christmas Day in the small church in Promise Creek. The attendance was sparse. Ezra Thompson, a few of the more open-minded townsfolk, and a handful of ranchers from neighboring properties who'd come to respect Madeline's determination and Isaiah's quiet competence. Mrs. Peterson was notably absent, a fact that neither bride nor groom lamented. Spring brought new beginnings to the rocking bee. The cattle had calves, the garden Madeline had plotted out during the winter months began to sprout, and Isaiah surprised her by repainting the house and carving a new sign for the entrance to their property. It read Ingram and Beckett Ranch, a testament to their equal partnership. It was on a warm May evening, as they sat on their newly repaired porch swing, that Madeline finally asked the question that had been on her mind for months. Do you ever regret taking a wife with lines on her face instead of a younger woman? Isaiah looked at her with surprise, then understanding dawned in his eyes. He reached out and traced the fine lines at the corner of her eye with a gentle finger. These lines. They're the story of your life, Madeline. They show where you've laughed, where you've worried, where you've squinted against the sun while bringing this ranch back to life. His hand moved to cup her cheek. They're the lines of my story now too, because my life is better for having you in it. Every day, every year, they'll deepen and our story will grow richer. I wouldn't change a single one. Tears welled in Madeline's eyes as she leaned into his touch. I love you, Isaiah Ingram. And I love you, Madeline Ingram. Every line, every day, every moment. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Madeline rested her head on Isaiah's shoulder, his arm warm around her. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully, the barn stood solid against the evening sky, and their house, their home, waited, lights glowing in the windows. This was not the life she had once envisioned for herself. It was better, harder in some ways, filled with physical labor and challenges she never could have anticipated, but richer in all the ways that truly mattered. Here with Isaiah, her age was not a liability but a badge of honor, each year bringing new experiences, new joys, new lines to tell their continuing story. 5 years later, the Ingram and Beckett Ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the territory. Their herd had grown, as had their reputation for fair dealing and hard work. They had added a nursery to the house, where their 3-year-old daughter, Hope, slept peacefully, her face a perfect blend of her parents' features. One summer afternoon, as they hosted a gathering for neighboring ranchers, Madeline overheard a conversation that made her smile. Never would have thought it, one man said to another. That city woman turning this place around. With Ingram's help, the other added. Nah, they did it together. Equal partners, that pair. Never seen a couple so well matched. Later, as the guests departed and the evening quieted, Madeline found Isaiah by the corral, watching as Hope giggled at the antics of a new foal. Penny for your thoughts, she said, slipping her arm around his waist. Isaiah pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Just thinking how lucky I am, how different things might have been if you hadn't been cast aside by that fool back east. Madeline laughed, the sound carrying across their land. His loss was very much my gain. And mine, Isaiah added, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that Madeline had come to love. Lines that spoke of joy, of wisdom, of a life fully lived. As Hope ran to them, arms outstretched, Madeline lifted her daughter up between them, creating a circle of family that had seemed impossible not so long ago. More story, Papa, Hope demanded, patting Isaiah's weathered cheek. Which one, little one? The one about the princess who saved the cowboy from the flood. No, the one about Mama's lines. Isaiah's eyes met Madeline's over their daughter's head, love shining clear and true between them. Ah, that's my favorite too, he said softly. You see, Hope, your mama has these beautiful lines right here. He traced the corner of Madeline's eye gently. And they tell the story of her courage, her strength, and her heart. One day you'll have your own lines telling your own story. And they'll be beautiful too. Hope asked, her small fingers reaching up to touch her mother's face. The most beautiful, Madeline assured her. Because they'll show that you've lived and loved and laughed, just like your father and I. As the sun set on another day at the Ingram and Beckett Ranch, Madeline knew with absolute certainty that the lines on her face would continue to deepen with the passing years. And she wouldn't have it any other way. For each one was evidence of a life well lived, a love hard won, and a story still being written line by precious line.